I wanted to build an Asian-inspired fountain, mostly just for the sound that it makes in the garden, but also for the looks of it. And so I got a pot that didn't have a hole in the bottom so it would hold water, and some scrap bamboo and about a $25 pump, and built this fountain. As I said, really the project begins with a pot with no hole in the bottom. Holding water certainly matters in these things. That most pots are drilled to allow drainage for the plant, and so finding a pot with no hole in it or being able to seal up the hole is pretty important. I would also add that a pot like this, you can see on the inside, is white, and it really doesn't look as good. The water looks better if it's black and you can't see down into it, so I will probably end up coating the inside of this pot with something black. So here's a piece of bamboo I have. It's about 1.5 inches in diameter, and this is going to become the sort of the central stack of the fountain. And you can see I'm cutting right above one of the joints in the bamboo. I do this in order to, when it is upright in the pot, it won't take in water. It's sort of waterproof, and it gives you more of a sealed unit, and it actually looks better. They don't look very good if you can look down into the hole of the bamboo. So now I'm just kind of sampling it for the height. It's totally an aesthetic thing, the way I want it to look, and I've measured the height, and now I'm going to cut the bottom of it at an angle because of the pot. You can see the pot slopes in from wide to narrow, and so the walls of the pot are angled, and I wanted to cut the bamboo to match that angle so that when the bamboo is up against the edge of the pot, it will stand upright at 90 degrees with the world. So I'm just cutting the bottom of this off at an angle to kind of match the angle of the pot. This will make sense probably more in a minute. Here I'm just kind of testing it again for height, just getting an idea of how I want it to look, where I want the spout to be located on that larger stack. And here I'm just holding a piece of wood next to it, just kind of guessing on some angles and some sizes and some heights. And then I determine where that spout is going to go. And I came up with another piece of bamboo that was about 7/8 of an inch in diameter. And so that's going to be the piece that I'm going to create the spout out of. I'm just taking a caliper and measuring that. It's fairly close to 7/8. I happen to have a 7/8 inch Forstner bit. So I'm going to drill the stack at an angle with a 7/8 inch bit so that this spout will go into it. What I'm doing here now is just using a Jorgensen clamp to create sort of a jig to hold the stack at the proper angle and be able to tighten that down so I can lay this flat in my drill press, run the 7/8 inch bit in, and I get more of an angled hole, so it'll become more of an oval shaped hole to take the spout when the spout goes in at an angle. So here I am at the drill press, just drilling that hole, again holding the stack at an angle and drilling a 7/8 inch hole in the side of it at an angle. And once I tried the stack in, or the spout into this, it was a very nice bit at 7/8. It was maybe a little bit tight, but I think you want it tight so that it doesn't wiggle around when birds land on it and stuff like that. So here now I'm going to shape the stack. What I'm going to do first is cut an angle in the back side of it because it is sitting in the stack at an angle, and I've got a piece of copper tubing that's going to go up that stack and then bend down into the spout. And so I've got to allow it some clearance to go in the bottom of that angle. So you can see here I'm trying the size, and it ends up fitting really, really tight in there. Next, because there's one joint in that stack, I've got to break that out. I usually just drive a rod down it or a bolt. Here I've got a bolt with a nut on it. I'm just putting it up against that membrane on the inside and hitting it with a hammer, and it'll just break out because I've got to be able to run a copper tube up the center of this, and it wouldn't go by that joint unless I broke it out of the way. Now I'm going to drill in the bottom of this to create a slot, because my copper tube is going to come in from the front face of this stack, bend pretty much a 90 degrees, go up the stack, bend at more than a 90 degrees where it comes out of the hole and goes down into the spout. So here I'm creating kind of a slot so that I can lay my copper tube into that stack. And so I've drilled a hole just so you won't have splitting issues, and then I'm using my Japanese saw to cut a couple of kerfs in order to pull a slot out of that bottom of the stack. You'll see this in a second here as I finish these two cuts. This allows you to basically just shove the copper up there and bend it. You don't have to try to fish it through. It's pretty hard to fish on a 1/4 inch copper tubing. It's not pliable. It's kind of stiff. It's kind of a pain to work with. So here's my piece of tubing. There's just some scrap. I've run it up through the tube, out that hole by just putting a little bend in it. And then I'll just slowly and carefully with my hands bend the angles in that tubing. And you got to be careful when you're bending it that you don't crease it or kink it. But if you're careful and you bend it slowly and just slowly and carefully, you can get it to conform. Now I'm using the spout as sort of a lever to bring that upper angle down to sort of match the angle of the spout on the fountain. And you'll see that's the top. Then down at the bottom, I'm just bending it through that slot I created. Again, bending about a 90-degree turn in the copper, and that'll become the attachment point for my plastic tubing that'll go from the pump to the copper. Now you could just run the plastic tubing all the way up through the bamboo, bend around the corner, go down into the spout. But I have found that the stiffness of the bamboo actually helps to kind of hold the spout in place, and it makes it easier to connect and disconnect the fountain from the pump when you're cleaning the pot and things like that. So here I'm using a tubing cutter, and I'm just going to cut the end of that thing off. Now I'm going to put kind of a spout end into the spout that I think is decorative and looks nice. So what I do is just make a cut across the spout and then a cut halfway through the diameter, and it creates a nice little pouring spout that I think looks really nice on an Asian inspired fountain. So here I am just cutting halfway through the spout, through the diameter of the spout. And then I'll put it in my vise and cut down from the halfway point. I'll go back about 3/4 to 7/8 of an inch back. And this is totally just a looks thing. I just think this happens to look nice. You can also just cut an angle on the end of the spout. That also looks nice. But this has that look of, you see the water flowing kind of down this little trough. And I just think it's a little aesthetic touch to the fountain. So here I am just cutting that down about an inch. Then I'll finish these cuts to make them meet each other and pull that piece out. And you'll see that I end up with a nice looking spout. The end wasn't perfectly square, so I'm going to square it up here. Japanese saw, by the way, is the saw to use on bamboo. It makes such a fine cut and doesn't tear up the bamboo. So there's sort of the idea of how that's going to look. And now I'm going to make the pieces that runs crossways that will hold it level and straight on the edge of the pot. So I'm taking 2 pieces of bamboo. These are about, I would guess, 5/8 of an inch in diameter. Again, I'm cutting them just past the joints on both ends so that they will also be a closed end. Again, I just think it makes them last a little longer. They won't rot quite as quickly if you don't have water running through the inside of the bamboo just from rain. So here's those 2 pieces, and I'm going to set those on the pot, and now I'm going to pin them to the upright stack. And the way I do that is just with metal wire. I've done a little drawing here to show you how I do that. I just take a piece of wire and bend it into like a staple shape, drill some small holes in those 2 horizontal pieces, and just shove the wire through like a staple all the way through, and then out the back, and then I just bend them over. And once I've wrapped this in black jute as a decoration, it covers the staple, at least from the front end. And so you don't see that there's a mechanical connection. But let me tell you, the mechanical connection really helps, because if you're relying on the jute alone, you'll have a floppy fountain that will let you down over time. So here I am drilling those horizontal pieces, trying to match the holes up, get straight lines with these holes so that it'll be easy to shove that wire through. It's kind of hard to guide it through 2 holes in the horizontal piece, 2 more holes in the upright piece, and 2 more holes in the back piece. But if you're careful with the drilling and try to drill straight lines, you can get that metal wire to go all the way through the fountain and hold these at 90 degrees to each other and add a whole lot of stiffness to the body of the fountain. I use just a galvanized wire. I don't know where I got it, but I have a bunch of it. It's just 3-foot long pieces. It bends real easily. It's galvanized. It won't rust. It stays where you put it when you bend it. And you can see here I'm just forming, like I say, kind of like a giant staple. Push it through that front piece, push it through the holes in the stack, and then push it through the back piece and bend it over. And yeah, from the back of this fountain you would see the staples, and so if you wanted to be more stealthy than that and cover the looks of that staple, you just wrap the jute. You'll see that later when I'm wrapping it. Again, that's just aesthetic. It's not really helping to hold the thing together, but it gives it a good Asian look. You could wrap it differently to cover the staples in the back, or cover the wire in the back as well. But here you can see the idea, how nicely 90 degrees it holds that and stiff. Honestly, that alone would work. You wouldn't have to add anything more to this fountain, and it would work. But it's not really a good look, and it's not really a finished look. I think the black jute actually really finishes the look of this when you wrap it and give it that kind of an authentic look. Here I made a couple little cross pieces just to hold those horizontal pieces at a given distance, and now I'm using a black jute. I'm simply wrapping these. Again, it's totally for looks. I mean, I'm sure it's helping a little bit to hold it together, but it's way more for looks. I'm wrapping it around those 2 pieces and then around again on the inside. I think it's just a good look. And you'll see I'm just wrapping this around. I lay down a loop of string and then finish this interior wrap, put the end of the string through that loop, and then pulling on the loop, you pull the end of the string under the wrap and it tightens the string, and you really don't need much of a finishing knot. What I tend to do then after this is use a little bit of CA glue and just kind of soak down that area where the loose end was, so as not to allow it to unravel over time in the weather. That CA glue will dull out and you won't see it at all after a few weeks outdoors. So here's the other side of it. I'm wrapping it just the same as that one I just did. Wrapping around the outside of those two horizontal pieces, and then some wraps down the middle. Again, I just think it gives it a nice finished look. And, you know, it's a look that you see if you go to a Japanese garden. Most of the bamboo is held together with black jute, and it just gives it a nice sort of a finished look. Here I am again wrapping that through, pulling it through that loop, pulling the loop back under, and tightening that up, spreading a little glue on it to hold it in place. Now I'm going to wrap the middle. The middle, again, I'm doing kind of a crisscross pattern. This will, in the front of the fountain where you see it, will cover that metal staple I made. Again, the back, if you wanted to cover those wires in the back, you would just do this crisscross pattern both front and back. But what I'm doing is just crisscrossing in the front. I'm laying that string right next to each other as I go around to give a nice even coverage. And as I bring that around a few more times, it totally fills in across the front of the fountain, covering that staple completely. And now again, I'm going to bring the string through, tie it off, get it to stay put, put a little glue on that as well to hold it into place. And I've pretty much got a finished fountain here. The remaining thing to do is to get a little clear tubing and connect the copper, 1/4-inch copper tube that's in the fountain to the 1/4-inch outlet on the pump. I just got about a foot of 1/4-inch clear tubing, and just pressure fit that onto the copper at the fountain end of the deal, and pressure fit that onto the little spout with a valve on the pump. And there's the pump, there's the tube holding the two together. And you can see this pump has a little valve to adjust the amount of water. I like these to just be barely at a trickle. I think they sound better and they don't splash as much. And so here's the finished fountain in the yard. Probably not where it's going to go permanently, but at least as a test, here it is. And I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please subscribe, and thank you for watching.